Dazzling Aurora is one of the most high risk, high reward cards in the game. Very feast or famine. A type of card where when you have Dazzling Aurora or when you are able to draw it out on curve, you are on top of the world and you are likely going to be winning that game ever slowly. But when you don't find it, then your deck is hopefully able to function with all the ramp that it's going through. It's a 9-cost gear, recycle 2, that says at the end of your turn, reveal cards from the top of your main deck until you reveal a unit. Play it, ignoring all of its costs, and recycle the rest. So that's even its energy and its power costs, everything. The beauty of this card is that you are, again, able to play in unit and you are able to cheat out units that are of higher cost. And what I wanted to do in this video is go over the best units that you have for this, with a couple of exceptions. Notably, we are very early in Riftbound right now. We only have one set out in Origins, and we have Spiritbound around the corner, but again, that is only 2 sets. The key to Dazzling Aurora is that you need to be able to ramp into it. You are not going to be playing this on curve, so ideally you are playing this alongside green, if not just orange. So you are going orange splash or green splash, and so whichever one you are ultimately doing, you have to stick to those colors. And so what I'm going to do is stick to those traditional colors and maybe not opt for too many of those spicy includes. I might include one right at the end that I'm hoping maybe one day in Riftbound will get its time in the light. Now, Dazzling Aurora being a gear does open it up to certain types of removal, and it is available in a limited fashion in set 1, but one that will become more prominent in set 2. So if you're excited for this type of deck, it may actually become cheaper because it'll become worse in set 2. And I think like with the consistency that you get out of certain cards in set 2, it actually may, yes, be worse, but there are certain ways that you can work around that. And in the long term, I think it will be a card that will only serve to be more powerful as the ramp in consistency in this game grows. So again, you want to be ramping into this. You want to generally be playing this with green, but you have the ramp in this color as well. So the first unit that we're going to be going over is Deadbloom Predator. Now, these couple of first ones that I'm going to go over are relatively stock because you want an immediate effect when it comes down, or one that your opponent has to severely plan around when it hits. Deadbloom Predator is fantastic because you can play Deadbloom to an occupied enemy battlefield. Now, notably, there's a bit of a trick to this. There are going to be niche scenarios where your opponents actually do not have a kind of occupied battlefield, and that is one way that they can play around Deadbloom Predator. You cannot play Deadbloom Predator to an unoccupied battlefield, and generally speaking, playing a deck like this, you will not have an occupied battlefield before the Dazzling Aurora goes off, and this is going to be your first unit. So of course, if you're playing against an aggressive strategy like Annie, then you're going to be able to take over a battlefield and really tackle it. Being 8 might is really powerful, and just kind of forcing immediate interaction on that turn is going to be valuable to you, because remembering that Dazzling Aurora, if you play it on 9, you recycle 2 runes, you go back to 9. So if you have something like this in hand, next turn, you are going to be able to play it out. You're going to have the runes you require to play out a following one or something at 9. And so that's the type that's the type of math you want to think about when you're playing something like Dazzling Aurora. What are you untapping to? What resources do you have? So Deadbloom Predator is kind of great on both sides. We see this in Master Yi decks, and having that deflect is very powerful if your opponent is pointing multiple spells at it to try and get it out of the way. Deadbloom Predator, a staple in this game right now. Next up is going to be Mind Splitter, and this card is fantastic, just being able to grab pieces out of your opponent's hand. Choose an opponent, they reveal their hand, choose a card from it, they discard that card. Now, one thing that I learned like pretty quickly is that this isn't Sabotage. Sabotage is usually played in the decks that are playing something like the Aurora, because you want to be able to sabotage and remove your opponent's spells that destroy gears. But in game 1s, they might not have that, and you're looking to remove the cards that out of like the big mana spell decks that are dealing, 6 damage or dealing even more to a singular unit. And yes, that's not going to be able to destroy Mind Splitter, but a combination of that plus a unit will be able to deal that. So playing out the Mind Splitter, it's obviously in your base. You can get rid of that. That way, your opponent isn't able to chain multiple spells together and make sure that this card that you played for free is not completely dead. They now have to think about how they want to combat this next turn. And then you can go into that knowing that, hey, they didn't do anything. They just scored some points and passed. How do I then use this Mind Splitter based on the information I have in their hand? Mind Splitter, I would say, is definitely a staple. Like if you're in these colors and you're playing purple and orange and you're playing Dazzling Aurora, unless they print something strictly better, like Mind Splitter is that 3 of staple. You are playing this as a set. Next up, this is going to be another just set. This is probably the best unit in the game when it comes to strictly cheating out with Dazzling Aurora. 12 cost Volibear, 2 to recycle if you do happen to cast. You're ramping in the deck. There is going to be the niche scenario where you have all 12 of your runes and you play this. Shield 3 when defending. This can go up to 13 might. Tank, I must be assigned combat damage first so it can protect other units in situations where you're looking to maybe double up and reinforce certain areas and you're up against an opposing Aurora player. When an opponent moves to a battlefield other than mine, draw 1 card. And what's beautiful about this is that there's a location in the game, I'm forgetting the name of it right now, but it makes it so whenever you conquer that location, you recycle a rune. And so what you can do is you can have scenarios where maybe you're playing some removal, like the 2 cost spell that makes it so you choose 1 unit you control and a unit your opponents control, and they each deal damage to each other equal to their might. And you can let your opponent conquer that. Well, they recycle a rune, and then you use that and force it to empty out again, and then you're forcing your opponent to do it over and over again. And then you know that your own field that you have the Volibear on is likely reinforced with at least 1 or 2 other units. They are not conquering that whatsoever. And so every time they conquer that other battlefield, not only are they likely recycling a rune, but then they also are allowing you to draw cards. So again, just these like overwhelming advantages that you're able to gain, stopping them on resources, and then also drawing cards is going to be a great way to draw your ramp spells in these colors that, thankfully, if you're unable to draw runes, you just transfer that into cards. Like the 2 mana 1, ramp a rune exhausted if you can't draw a card. The 4 mana 1, ramp 2 runes. If you can't do that, you draw 2 cards, like all this type of stuff. Like drawing into more of those, drawing into other cards that you can then just start hard casting is just going to really start closing out the game. Volibear, at this point, if you're playing Aurora, like alongside Aurora, you're playing 3 of these. And then at that point, like you're maybe playing in other colors and you're choosing that. This is a 3 of staple. You're playing Aurora, you're probably playing this, just saying. Next up is the last unit that I kind of had some back and forth on. I recently made some videos on it and I was kind of like whatever about initially, just 9 cost Mountain Drake, a generic unit at 10 might. And I had a lot of problems with it just because it didn't have utility. And honestly, at the end of the day, 10 might is just really hard to remove. It doesn't require the shield. It doesn't require the tank. At the end of the day, just a 9 power unit is really powerful. And if you remember what we were talking about regarding the Dazzling Aurora math, if you have 9 runes to cast Dazzling Aurora, you go down on 2 runes casting it, you untap to 2 more, back to 9. This is just something you can hard cast. So you have to think about like unit costs when you're playing stuff like this, and being on curve, if you just have it in your hand, is extremely powerful. Off of Aurora, off of a hard cast, it's just a fantastic thing to be doing. Mountain Drake, just, it's hard to do this without using multiple cards. And that's the type of thing that you're looking to like use to slowly piecemeal your opponent out. Like, yeah, they can get to 6 points, they can get to 7 points, but if they're not at 8, they're not winning. And cards like this really help you take that advantage back because they will not have the spell density to be able to take back. At this point, we're going to be looking at some utility units. Now, these may not be stock. You might include them as a one-of. You might choose to play them as a playset. They might become more and more powerful as future sets come on. But for now, I think generally speaking, they are either niche or are generally a one-of in the Aurora decks. First is going to be Soul Gorger. 8 cost, pretty high cost for just like 5 might. But when you play me, you may play a unit from your trash, ignoring its energy cost, still paying its power. So similar to the 6 rune spell that also exists that has a similar cost and a similar requirement, Soul Gorger, you're able to cheat out and is a great target off 2nd Aurora or 3rd Aurora. My problem with this is I don't really like this card because if it hits off 1st Aurora, it is probably like the worst one that you can get. It just doesn't have that type of value. It's not able to go into combat or conquer really efficiently. It's a utility spell, and I would almost rather just be playing the spell version at 3 instead of just cheating this out, because it's like the worst first one to hit. I want to make sure that when I'm playing Aurora, I have as much consistency as possible, and this is a one of. Like, I can see the argument. I just don't think it's that competitive, considering that Aurora isn't necessarily that competitive anyway. You don't really want to be messing with this. Next up is going to be Madden Marauder. 5 mana, one that's pretty nice because you can play early on. It doesn't have any recycle costs, so you're not losing on any ramp potential. It has tank. When you play me, move a unit from a battlefield to its base. So it's going to be a great way to not only in the early game stave off any pressure. So it's not a enemy unit, just you can move your own units if you need to, but this is a great way to just play it out tapped, and then just take off a little bit of early aggression. And then it can also force like ganking units to make like suboptimal moves and everything, and force other spells or champion abilities to like move that around. And so there's a lot of things that you can do, just like moving something back to base and like applying a lot less pressure with something like this. So I think it's actually a pretty decent one of target. Again, just because you can play it on 5, you're not restricted by any recycling costs in its power, but also a pretty decent flip off of Aurora. Next up is going to be Carnivorous Snapvine. When you play me, choose an enemy unit at a battlefield. We deal damage equal to our mites to each other. This is actually a pretty decent flip as well, because it serves a similar purpose to the previous card, where you temple something out, but also this one kind of comes down and is just able to remove something, which is a lot more powerful. And honestly, 6 might is actually pretty good. There's a lot of units out there that gain power in combat or in defense. So it gets around not only just like the tank ability, sorry, not tank. If I kind of go back, I'm misnaming it, but shield, sorry. It gets around the shield ability, but also there are battlefields where when something is attacking, or defending, they gain +1 as well. So this also gets around that. So this is actually a pretty sweet one of, unfortunately, when you're playing it on curve, you are losing 2 power. So you really have to think about this when you're like playing this out early. If you're desperate, it's not a bad body. But again, ignoring certain effects that only happen in combat and only happen when they're on a battlefield is really powerful. And having that type of removal stuck onto a creature is good. I think this is like a 1 to 2 of. This isn't like probably just a 1 of, like, it's not really the most optimal flip, but a pretty sweet card if you're able to kind of get into it. Next up is one that you'll actually see in a lot of Aurora decks. I'm 50-50 on it. I still do think it's powerful. For 7, Anivia is a card that says when I attack, deal 3 damage to all enemy units here. And it's really powerful as 8 might, because you are going to get this down before that ability is going to go off before you're able to have your opponent kind of deal damage back. So just being able to wipe clear a bunch of tokens that are being generated, especially going into Spirit Forge, we are seeing generally a couple of more ways to like gum up boards with like smaller units. And so just being able to deal 3 damage to all of that is really powerful. So you're generally going to see this at 7. It's not bad. You recycle 2, but come back up to 7. 8 might is really great on an effect like this, and it works really well in combination with Warwick. Warwick says for 6, it enters ready. When I attack, kill all damage units here. And what's nice is you can stack this in such a way where like you have the Anivia trigger go off dealing 3 damage. And then if something is massive, so let's say you're going up against a mirror when it comes to the Aurora decks, or you're playing up against a bunch of creatures that are like really powerful. You think of something like a Mundo, or like cards that like gain power. The card that gains power equal to the amount of points that you scored. Dealing a little bit of damage to it and then playing like a Warwick is really powerful. You also have like that one spell for 2 where you deal 1 damage to each unit in battlefields. Playing that, then playing Warwick or attacking with Warwick is really powerful. So if you have that in your sideboard, that could be a great way to like deal with the go wide strategies. Again, cards like this are actually really powerful when you're able to combine them. This could create like a tempo value, like Aurora shell, where you're not necessarily going large, but you're going kind of small, and you're dealing with like maybe a local metagame that likes a lot of go wide strategies, has a lot of anti decks or something like that, and you're able to stop them. So something to think about. Next up is going to be Psy Scout. Having vision when it comes down. So for 6, you can naturally play it. You don't lose any ramp. Only 5 might, but it's pretty good. Vision, when you play me, look at the top card of your main deck, you may recycle it. So if it's not something you like, you know that when you play this, when you untap, you are going to draw a card. You can recycle that card to the bottom if it's not something you want. Maybe it's in the Aurora and you're more than happy to top deck it because you played Aurora for 9, you lose 2, you untap to 9, you can play another one, all the type of stuff. You're double Auroring, you're winning the game, right? So you get that value. You may play me to an open battlefield. And what's great about this is that I don't think I'm mentioning it in the next one, I'm not, but there is a misfortune. Generally the Aurora decks are either Master Yi or Misfortune. There is a misfortune at 4 cost that allows you to do this. If you have it out from the champion zone, you can play all units open battlefields. And I think that's like relatively a decent misfortune to actually play. I think the 5-cost one like slightly ekes out in terms of value. But the 4-cost one actually has a similar effect. Playing this in an open battlefield is similar to the Dead Bloom, where it's not occupied. There might be a situation where your opponent is forcing you into a open battlefield to do something, but then having immediately being able to play into something if you're ahead or whatever is a lot of value, especially if you're gummed up in a certain area and you're playing Misfortune. You're only able to gank like 1 unit at a time, but you don't really want to move a unit off and you'd rather like further fortify. Sai is able to immediately go into that, and then maybe you can gank something later down the line to further reinforce the Sai. So having something like this, just in terms of utility, is great. Just like fixing the next draw that you have, but also just being able to play it out on curve, not lose anything is not bad. Lastly, I want to talk about Ornn coming out of the Spirit Forge set for 5, recycling 1 green. So you're probably going to be playing this in like, if you're playing Aurora, you're probably playing it in Master Yi, you might be playing it in there, but you do have to build around it. And I do want to bring this up because when you play me or I hold, look, the top 4 cards of your main deck, you may reveal a gear from among them and draw it, then recycle the rest. This is actually a pretty decent way to like dig for other Auroras. The consistency in the game is only going to increase with Spirit Forged, and having more gears, like there are actually pretty decent gears that like not only ramp you some, but like get other pieces of value. So Ornn could actually be a cool way to build like gear Aurora. And eventually once we get like gear recursion at a large scale and stuff like that, Ornn is going to be a really central piece of that. So once we get more consistency and more targets, I think Ornn with Aurora could actually be really powerful. Right now, it's a little niche. It's not going to be that staple. I think it has a place in future Aurora decks. Just being able to hold and then like dig further for more ramp or another Aurora, or just like when you play with Aurora, potentially finding in another Aurora or just like another gear that's going to be useful. Yes, there's going to be gear removal. So it's just like when that Aurora you play like gets destroyed in game 2 or like in future sets in best of ones, then you're going to be able to dig for more even better alongside like your deck fixing and your draws and all that stuff. So I think Ornn could be a staple in Aurora decks. Lastly, I'm going to talk about Tibbers. Now, Tibbers has 2 colors, right? Tibbers is 2 colors. We don't have Aurora in these colors, but I'm mentioning Tibbers because there is a possibility in future in the Riftbound that there could be 3 colors in these champions. And when that happens with orange, it's about to go crazy. Whew, it's about to go crazy. We might be getting orange, purple, red, and then we could play Tibbers. Tibbers would be pretty sweet. When you play me, deal 3 damage to all units. And just like having I mean, obviously you would have to be playing Tibbers as a thing. Like there's a random niche world where something like this is playable. There's a random niche world. It's not now. It's not possible now. Not even in Spirit Forged. But I do want to bring it up because having to play a unit and immediately deal 3 damage to all units at battlefields is really powerful as a removal effect, as a board interaction piece to be able to clear the way against the go wide strategies like Annie. Obviously, this is, you know, a card that's going to be played alongside Annie, all that stuff, but like, you know what I mean? There are effects like this that are worth watching out for as Riftbound's design changes. Not going to be played anytime soon. Very hard to even get going because of the signature unit. But regardless, Aurora is in a really interesting place right now. I think, again, it is inconsistent. It is maybe not the most competitive thing in the world. You really need a lot of things to go your way, but we are only 1 set into the game. And as the consistency increases with the game and allows Aurora to gain more pieces, we will find recursion for Aurora, not only in ways to find it, but also get it out of the trash once your opponent destroys it. We are just going to be able to explode with value off of Aurora. And that's when things get really exciting. So I think this is the type of deck to, like, in my opinion, I'm going to be like investing into and just kind of watching out for. It's the type of card that, I mean, may get banned in the future depending on how they increase consistency in this game, but is one that's really interesting to look out for. Very high risk, high reward, feast or famine, as I mentioned, and just an overall fun card. I wish it was cheaper, of course, but ooh, baby, it's a crazy Magic card. Here I am being Magic pilled. I said Magic card. It's a great Riftbound card. Oh, folks, can you tell the game I primarily make content for? Anyway, have a great day, folks.